It is often stated around various corners of the internet that Starfleet ships are bloated when compared to comparable ships of foreign powers, with various reasons cited as to why this is and the potential problems this presents. But is this the case? And if Starfleet ships are indeed bloated when compared to the ships of the Klingon, Romulan, Gorn, Cardassian, Ferengi, Dominion, you get the picture, how does this affect their capabilities compared to these vessels? Well, this would be a short video if we didn't talk about the issue at length. So let's talk about it at length. The typical argument, as I have seen it, goes something like this. Starfleet ships are bloated compared to contemporary designs serving in rival powers due to their inclusion of larger crew quarters and scientific facilities. This makes the ship larger and compromises their combat abilities. Thus, despite being on average larger than the ships of other powers, Starfleet vessels actually underperform in Starfleet combat scenarios. Of course, the Romulans of the TNG era kind of throw a wrench in this with their ships, and other navies have increasingly large ships as time goes on. But throughout a lot of this period, Starfleet tends to have larger ships on average for a given role. Just a broad generalization there. As said, this is the main line of argument, and for the video we're going to break the argument down to its components parts, larger crew quarters and scientific facilities and sensor suites, tear down why I don't think those are really issues, and then, yeah, basically that's how this is going to go. Before we get to those argument lines, though, I think it's necessary to stress that Starfleet builds its ships to accomplish different things to other fleets. The mainline ships of the Klingon, Romulan, Cardassian, you get the idea, they're not built for the same things. They build their ships to fight their wars. They are warships, first and foremost, with any other capabilities, such as internal policing duties or exploration, coming as a secondary, often little considered feature. This means that straight comparing a Starfleet ship to another race's equivalent isn't fair, as they are not at all equivalent, because Starfleet builds their ships to perform many other duties. They are not just warships, though they can fight the Federation's wars. They are not just explorers, though Starfleet has a focus on exploration. They are not meant for responding to emergencies, though they are well equipped to respond to emergencies, and answer calls for aid if required. Disclaimer, I thought was kind of necessary, but we'll move on to the other bits. So, crew quarters. The idea here is that Starfleet devotes so much more space to the crews of their ships that it adds appreciably to the size of their ships. Crew of most other races are lucky to get a bunk to themselves. A Starfleet crewer gets an apartment with a roommate, but this apartment is complete with toiletry facilities, separate living and sleeping areas, and other amenities in the form of lounges, rec areas, and holodecks available to them outside of their quarters themselves. So this argument has some merit, but it's mostly pointless, and again brings us back to the key issue that Starfleet builds ships with different goals and longer endurance in mind than other powers. Basically, oh yeah, it takes up more space when you're providing a crew with all the facilities of a good-sized town aboard your ship than when you're giving them a bunk and a communal shower and saying, live with it. But in terms of how much this impacts a Starfleet vessel's abilities, I don't think it's that much, as the vast majority of a ship's internal volume will still be devoted to other uses. And when you're playing around with antimatter reactors, 10 or 15 extra % volume to your ship won't matter much as long as you have power to burn to move all that mass around. It just really doesn't have that much effect, and furthermore, yeah, Starfleet ships have larger quarters for individual crewers, but that's because they spend much more time in space. Most other nations are not going that far from their borders. They're not unsupported for that long. A Klingon crew on a bird of prey might have garbage facilities, but you know what? They're not going to be aboard that bird of prey for years and years and years at a time. They're going to be doing other stuff. A Starfleet ship might be unsupported away from home forever, and if you're in the same facilities as a much smaller Klingon ship with a much more cramped crew, your morale is going to tank. I mean, the fact that Voyager was able to go so long with relatively high crew morale probably had a lot to do with the fact that they had nice quarters that were comfortable. I would much rather be aboard Voyager than a bird of prey for any length of period, let alone several years. And I think that just kind of fits in, that for Starfleet's mission profiles, larger crew spaces make sense. They are very, very important if you want your crew to be happy on their mission and not have a morale plummet in 6 months away from base because, you know what, they're tired of their 5 roommates and they never get alone time. Just, again, Starfleet is built different. The final argument we're going to look at here as to why Starfleet ships are bloated is that they have all that scientific stuff packed aboard, and that all of these geological, biological, stellar mass spectrometry scopes, subspace wave analyzers, biolabs, workspaces, and gelato machines, as another YouTuber likes to add, contribute to the bloat of a ship. Soda can. And again, much the same as with the crew quarters, well, yeah, all this stuff which a Klingon or Romulan ship would not be caught dead having will add to the weight of a Starfleet ship, and make them significantly larger as a result. But because Starfleet ships are designed to do different things and have major power to burn, it doesn't matter that much. And yeah, Starfleet ships have a much bigger sensor suite and much enhanced laboratory space than compared to other nations, and as a result, their ships are larger, but it doesn't really affect their performance in combat, because they have different intentions behind their design. I would also add that larger sensor suites probably benefits you in combat, because it means that you have a wider amount of data coming in, and the facilities to process that data. So a Starfleet ship might not seek out combat, but once it's in combat, it's going to be able to see things that the Klingon ship with its more military-focused sensor suite just won't, and that might give a Starfleet captain an edge. It might let him go into a spatial anomaly that really, really throws sensors for a loop, but because you have more sensors to work with, even if they're, say, 3% as effective as normal, you have 50 to 100% more sensors to play with, which means you'll see more. And you might see a part of the spectrum that the Klingon ship won't, and that might give you an edge. So, again, that weakness has a specific point, and that point probably turns to an advantage fairly quickly. So, to wrap things up, yes, Starfleet ships do have considerably more volume devoted to things not directly related to combat than their contemporaries. But this does not impact their combat effectiveness, as we see throughout the shows that Starfleet vessels are not at all at a disadvantage in most combat situations against peer-level opponents. By the way, I'm describing peer-level opponents as a ship that is roughly as effective and fulfills a similar role to their vessel. Something like a Borg cube versus an Oberth is not a peer-level opponent. Something like USS Grissom versus a bird of prey is not a peer-level opponent, even though they're roughly the same size. USS Enterprise, original flavor Constitution versus a D7 is a much more even fight. They're peer-level. So just get that out of the way. In addition, Starfleet vessels are designed to achieve different goals than other races. So direct comparisons achieve very little, like comparing the speed and handling of a school bus versus a semi. Both are great big honking vehicles which drive on the same roads, but they have very different purposes, and despite initial impressions of being both large motor vehicles, they have very little in common. Well, a lot of them have the same chassis and engine, but in terms of how much weight they're pulling and other features like that, they're very, very different. Comparing a Mini Cooper to a semi, very, very different. I want a Mini Cooper. Probably not going to happen, but, that would be super fun. They're not really in the same range of what they're supposed to do, so comparing them doesn't really make a lot of sense. A rowboat to a space shuttle. Rowboats are still around, space shuttles are gone. If you liked this video, I know this has been the first video in a little while, things got crazy and I got super demotivated after a family visit. A relative of mine dropped by for a week, and I've been struggling to get back into the groove. That was like a month ago. Lots of fun, though. But yeah, so hopefully videos will be resuming more regularly than the 2-3 weeks that happened, however long it was since this. Anyway, hopefully that's a more regular deal. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm back, baby.